Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast, the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education. The goal is to provide meaningful conversation to what is currently happening in our classrooms. Stories, pains, moments of success. We want to hear it all. Hey there, friends. Welcome. Super grateful to be back. I just want to do a big shout out to everyone that has been following, liking, listening, uh, signing up to be a guest and being on. Super grateful as I'm starting to really get my footing in the podcasting scene. And tonight, super excited. So we get to talk with someone that is a podcaster himself. I've been on his show, super fun guy. And so like before I kind of go into letting Mr. Michael Rotondo kind of go into where he comes from in education, but like just looking, I'm looking at the bio right now and so impressive, and just I can't wait to dive into this conversation because Mr. Mike is an educator, he is content creator, podcaster, um, author, as well as a poet. And so the title of this episode is Under the Hat of a Poet. And we'd really like to dive into that because as a history teacher, I'm all about a good story, right? And so super grateful, Mike, for you to be on. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's a long day. If you're a teacher, anybody in education knows it's always a long day. You don't get a lot of breaks to go to the washroom, but I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm good, man. I'm good. Like we're into, I believe, episode 3 now,
Yeah.
and really enjoying this new hobby that I have now, and really enjoying connecting with everyone that I've connected with so far, kind of seeing the guest registrations come in, and you being in line here. Super grateful that you took the time to come join us today. Um, if you are listening in, whether it's right now, feel free to drop in that love in the chat. Would love to know where you're from, what you do, whether it's on Instagram, X, whatever it is, or if you're listening to this in the future. And so, just as a reminder, that if you want more information on my show, visit underhatpod.com. That'll give you all the access to the YouTube, to the social media, to registration, to all of it. And you can grab the episodes from there. But without further ado, super curious as to Mike, like you have this laundry list of things that you've accomplished. So tell us about you. Where'd you come from? What's your context in education? How'd you get into content creation? I know it's like a lot going on. Though feel free to tell us more.
Well, I mean, I tried to give you the bio that was, I guess, a general umbrella of everything I've been doing. Probably not everything I have done in life. I've done too many things to count, but I did start working with kids as a teenager myself, so tutoring, all that stuff when I was in high school. And then because of our graduation thing in high school, we had to, part of our credits was to volunteer. So I volunteered at a kind of like an inner city center for kids after school, and that led me into working at day camps. Or led me into going in that direction. I guess at the beginning of education, it's getting your feet wet in those fields, and then I stumbled upon sleepaway camps because my father, who is into renovations, all that kind of stuff, is very hard nosed, old school Italian guy. Who you're not supposed to share your feelings and talk about these things. So I was really, and I, from an age of 12 years old, or I would go do jobs with this guy like jackhammering floors, and I worked hard. I worked like a man at 12 years old. So by 17, I was done, and I had to go. I had to go do something else. And that by that point, I was already writing poetry, and I'd write poetry to gets things off my chest because there's nobody really to talk to about that stuff. So I went into the I would call informal settings of education, camp settings and tutoring and those kind of things, which I fell in love with. And probably would still be in it today if I didn't. At some point, you kind of age out unless you're in a particular position. So I went and I worked. I worked in the Jewish community actually near us. I'm in Montreal, Quebec, and I'm being a Christian, being Catholic growing up. For me, was kind of left field, and I kind of fell in love with the community there. They were, arms open, come learn, come experience things. Went on a trip with all kinds of people, and that community led me. Like I worked there for 10, 11 years doing all kinds of jobs, like program coordinators for different age groups, counselor, supervisor, a sports hockey programmer. Like I did all kinds of things, and uh, for that particular part led me into you meet people and do connections. And I met somebody, and they were like, come work at our private school. And they have a sex of kind of private schools for the Jewish community here, and they run their own show. So I went to go interview while I was doing school, and they're like, come to be like an animator, so run programs for the kids during the day, and deal with behaviors and parents and for things like that. So I did that for 4 years, and they kind of encouraged me to go into education. They said, you should go be a teacher. And I was not, it's not something I had planned. I really wanted to go into computer science, but you go through life, and you've had some bad experiences, or you get the grades you want and you get discouraged. So you don't go back and try to iron those things out. So I guess I was in limbo, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go do this education thing that people keep telling me to do, even though I was already working in it, but not with a teaching license. And so I did. And what we have here in Quebec and Montreal, we have some of the main universities, like McGill University, Ottawa, Concordia University, and a couple others. And so what happened was I already had my bachelor's degree in child studies, and at that point, I applied to Ontario, which is the neighboring province to Quebec, and they had a 1 year program to get your certification with intensive placements. So I said, maybe I'll go apply there, and I got in. And so I went. I lived there for a year. It didn't work, but I saved all my money and worked extra jobs. I saved, well, at that time, I think I saved 20 grand just to go live and work and own and rent an apartment. And that was back in, I think, early 2000s, where like a 3.5 apartment was like $1,200 or $1,500. It was still mightily expensive back then. So I went and lived in Ottawa for a year, got my teaching degree, and then I came back and started out. I started out with whatever I can get, because if anybody remembers, everybody's listening. I know in the States probably maybe it's a bit similar, but in Canada, um, there's subbing lists for different public schools in different sectors, and then sometimes they're open or sometimes they're not. And there were no jobs, so you really had to like meet people, make connections and stuff. And while this was all going on, I'm still dabbling in my poetry writing, doing all that stuff. So anyways, I got my name known. I didn't turn down any work, and I worked high schools, I worked elementary school, and then I did some contracts like phys ed, physical education, computer science, you name it, any grade, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 6, I taught it all, grade 11, I taught everything. And I just, I found out my niche was elementary school, and so I went in that direction and tried to get contracts, and inevitably landing in special education, which is what I've done for the last, minus this year, the last, I guess, 10 years. I did special education for children with autism in the specialized classes, which I loved. I think that was one of the most difficult jobs anybody can do. The most rewarding, not financially, but in terms of,
Right.
activity and working with the kids. And, when you have a kid in kindergarten and then you work with him all the way to grade 4, grade 6, and he was in diapers, and then they're out of diapers and they're doing presentations, and they weren't even able to speak when you had them in kindergarten. Like that's kind of like that's like that's something special. And and I think that's what pushed me through all the tough years. It's like, we did this and we did this, and but eventually it just kind of, the environment or the situations I was put in were just too difficult. Like I suffered 3 concussions as a result of working with in those classrooms. One being last year, so I was off. I was on the shelf, sitting on the couch at home for an entire year, and
Mm.
which was uberly difficult to deal with. I think I lost myself quite a bit, and you being on the podcast, my podcast previously, um, I lost my. You lose your hobbies, you lose your things you love to do, you lose talking to people, and kind of rebuilding that now. So, and I'm jumping all over the place here, but feel free to stop me and interrupt. But so the writing part of my poetry stuff, going back to my second concussion, which was I think in 2017 or something like that, 2017, 2018. Does that make sense? Something like that. I had poetry, and the neurologist said to me, I need short-term and long-term goals to recover, because I wasn't even able to do anything for a couple of minutes. Like 5 minutes, I was burnt, right? So I said, okay. And I had lost my ability to write and read during my second concussion. So he said, every day, try to write and read a little bit. So I did that. And my long term goal was to self publish a poetry book, which I did, originally called Owl's Moonlight. And then once I published it, once I was recovered, it's like, I sat on it a little bit. I was like, I could do better. I could do better. And then I repackaged that into Turn Off the Lights, which was bigger, thicker, and which actually probably my most successful in terms of self-publishing, and really enjoyed that. A lot of people have shared that with people. People post on social media and there's things like that, and really enjoyed it. And took a little break, and then after the last concussion, I was like, okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing. Except the only respite I had was I was able to read and write this time. I couldn't count, which was really strange. And I was doing physiotherapy. I couldn't count to four. So the numbers thing was gone, but I was able to read and write. So I put together my I would say my second, because the last one was a combination, Plutonium Red, which is more a little bit of fatherhood, a little bit of different themes going on in the world, a little bit of the pandemic, a little bit of like what ifs and stuff out there, what's going on, government, overseeing stuff here, and kind of just just felt like I needed to do it because it felt like a healing process for me. So that's where my poetry writing comes into, and this year I'm teaching science to pre-K to grade 4, something different, and I'm enjoying it. I think it's a good change of pace. I mean, I'm not my life's not in danger, so which is really why I'm not teaching in the specialized classrooms anymore, because I can't take any more hits to the head. And I think, in a nutshell, that's generally how I got into education and writing. But that's the short form.
Yeah. No, it's like hearing you talk about that. I think oftentimes from a parent perspective, now that I have children, now that I have my own daughter in the public school system, like it's different than when you're a teacher starting out and you don't have kids, right? Like having a child and now seeing her, she did TK to K and now she's in first grade. You kind of have a different appreciation for the art of teaching, the pedagogy, the I didn't teach elementary, right? So like seeing the types of talents and skills that it takes to, you know, foster an environment for learning with that age group, with the various different challenges, right? Whether it's policy or what's going on at the school site or in a neighborhood, whatever it is. Um, but oftentimes, like we kind of lose. Well, we always talk about, like, oh, what's going on with the kids? What's going on with the kids? And we should be having those conversations for sure. But it's also like, man, what's going on with teachers? Because that could be another level of trauma, kind of like what you're talking about, different barriers, roadblocks. Life just happens. And it sounds like for you, like the poetry, the storytelling, like that was your outlet, right? And it's remarkable to see this go somewhere. Like I'm on Amazon right now looking at all 3 of your pieces here, all three of your books, as you're talking with them. Um, I'll I'll be sure to link this up on social, and so that way people can check it out and kind of see the work that you've done. Um, so that's kind of the poetry side of it. If you're listening, if you've not caught Mr. Mike on X, um, it is a laugh. Like I find myself like at least once a day on social media, you asking your questions online, and it's just hilarious. So like there's you have the content creation piece, right? Because I see some content out there, and then I also see like your brand on places like X, kind of seeing how you're engaging people. So what was your, because it is, I feel a little unique from what I've seen from uh, content creators that are educators, right? Um, so how'd you get into content creation, and what was kind of like your inspiration for the branding and the general premise of the show, and what you have going on?
Well, the Twitter thing is kind of by accident because of the I actually was told to start a Twitter account, even though I had it and I only used it for sports related news when I was doing like fantasy
Mm,
hockey and things like that. I was told to start a Twitter account for education purposes because I had enrolled in educational leadership for administration on our end here. So I went to attended McGill University at night here for administration, and a couple of the professors, but one particularly had all these courses. He's into tech stuff, and he really loved Twitter. And I was told that once you get him, you're going to get him, and he's going to have to do all these group engagements on Twitter. Which, if anybody is on X, I'm sorry if I'm calling it Twitter, but it's X is Twitter. It's I go in between.
it's good. It's good.
It's yeah, it's great for. And I was just talking to somebody on latest episode of my podcast about that is that X is great for community engagement in any community. So if you get into a niche, if it's educators, so educators is really big on X, or if it's art, or if it's writers and authors, there's all these little subgroups, and it's very easy to like do like professional development on X if you wanted to. So that was the beginning of it, and then the pandemic happened. So how it happened is you just kind of spent a lot of extra time on there when you didn't really have anything or anywhere to go. Really, you weren't really allowed to go anywhere, which is a little
Mhm.
to do. But I so my ex was really originally about engaging with educators and teachers and principals, and as time progressed, I started branching out into the writing community with my poetry, and then so you went from one community and then an extra community, and then there was the sports community with hockey cards because I collect hockey cards, and then so I had all these mini communities, and then I start branching into every other mini community because I was doing something else. I'm like, I want to know about podcasting now, so let me get into that community, and so my account kind of grew, and then you know you go from, let's say, engaging in education based stuff and asking those type of questions to posting random things and trying to like more I guess it kind of happened by accident, the question asking, and people started messaging me privately saying I really enjoy your seeing your post every day. I was having a rough day, or my mother just died, or I would get posts, I would get messages like that in my DMs, and I was like, okay, so this, I guess I have to keep up to it. So I would do, a couple a day, and then a couple a day would turn into, like 5 to 10 posts a day, and then comment on all those sub threads, and like like that's one thing. And if anybody will tell you, for me, in terms of the content creation thing, is that I try to talk and engage with every single person, which now at this point, if anybody's been on my X profile, it's not possible because some days I get like 1,000 notifications, some days I get more than 1,000 notifications. You can't reply to everybody, so I try to spread them out. I try to read them, and I kind of bank time during the day to read stuff. Like in the morning, I set aside half an hour to read all my notifications really fast, and then mid afternoon, and then at night I do the same thing. And so some of the tweets I like to post, I'll schedule just so people have them because we're not up at the same time. And if I'm
Mhm.
asleep, sometimes people like are in the States or a different time zone, they'll get the questions or they'll get some stuff in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping, and then wake up, I check all of them and try to answer. So it kind of evolved into that, uh, and that kind of evolved with the podcast, because once I started getting involved in the podcast, like I wanted to find something to do, and I guess I really found out that I like talking to people more than not, and like yourself, like so originally it started off, the podcast show started off as Wrong Answers Only, with a buddy of mine who I brought in like episode 4 or something like that. And the only reason why I started the podcast was, one, I was looking for a hobby. Two, people on Twitter was like, you should start the podcast and not do your questions. It's like, this is great. Okay, no problem. So I knew nothing about this, and I'm kind of tech savvy. I could build computers and stuff, but I didn't know anything. And you're kind of going through the process. I did all kinds of episodes, and then went back and changed all the audio or the intros, because then you find out about copyright infringements. Even though certain certain music and things we're using were supposed to be free and usable, they're not in some areas. So I went back and I redid like 50 episodes of music from the beginning and the end, which was crazy. But did that, changed up some audio. I mean, I had a really good time, and it was only audio based, so I wasn't comfortable yet with the video aspect of stuff. So that was that, and we had significant growth in the first season, I have to say, and I don't know if that so much was because of X and all the people that were there, but I think we were getting a variety of people coming and listening. And it was basically, if anybody had listened to some older episodes, I would ask questions, wrong answers only. So best way to bake a cake, and then wrong answers only, and everybody would give a list of these funny, and put pickles in it or something. And so we would read these answers on an episode for about 5-10 minutes or whatever, go through some questions and do that, and then talk about topic of the day or flavor of the day, or do some funny stuff or tell stories. And so that kind of evolved. And then my friend being a little bit busy, and I was like, you know what, I really like this, but I think I want to expand and bring in people. And then season 2, I start interviewing other professionals and guest authors, writers, educators like yourself. You were on in season 2, and
Mhm.
that was really cool. And it was a longer format. Like some of the episodes were like over an hour and a half, which at some point I was like, this is great, but I was getting really meticulous with the audio. I was cutting like every single noise out. Like an hour and a half episode, it would take 3 hours to edit and then put it together plus, and then you kind of run out of time. So anyways, we did all that, and I got to, I think, season 2, episode 50 or something like that, and then my concussion hit, and then I was out,
Mm.
and then I had some back log jammed episodes I didn't edit, and they then I eventually put them out like months later. But then I lost all the momentum that we had, and it kind of, like, people kind of forget about you at that point. And I was like, how? And then I spent great deal of time last year alone, thinking, how am I going to redo this to a point where it's more enjoyable for me, which is, I guess, you're not really supposed to do that. You're supposed to think about it from a perspective of the listener, or your people who are engaging in your content. But how's it enjoyable for me? Because if I'm not enjoying it, then I don't see what the point is in the end. But because it kind of ties into Twitter a little bit, and those different things, so I said, let me get a website. Let me do this. Let me do that. Got a website. It was Podpage. Podpage is really good. If and yourself, you're using it. If anybody wants to check it out for anything, it's fantastic. You can maximize different. I'm not selling anything here. I'm just saying, from a user standpoint, if you're like, you don't want to build a website, it's pretty good. But yeah, I did those things, and I think it was great. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna migrate the podcast to YouTube. I think that's the best thing to do right now. I'm gonna migrate the podcast to YouTube. I'm gonna build my YouTube now, which I've been doing for the last 3 months. And so in a short period of time now, I think we've grown from like zero to today. I think today 800 plus subscribers on YouTube, and now it's time for what am I doing with this? So it's another thing. Like Twitter was this, now YouTube was this. Now what am I doing with this? And we're gonna continue doing the content creation with interviews with guests, maybe some episodes with my friend. We're doing shorts on there now with wrong answers only and different stuff like that. Like if anybody's checked those out, like the recent ones were okay, and then some of them, it's like YouTube's like this. And then recently, we hit a couple where like you get 9,000 views or 8,000 views or 3,000 views. So it's fun. It's interesting. I get to talk to my friend about that every day, and we have some plans for actual video content. That's not podcast, not shorts, but video content of him and I doing some funny stuff to add to the YouTube. But that's where the content creation is going. And then I just was like, okay, this works. But now I brought the show kind of back to Spotify. So because now you can upload video with Spotify, and so I'm just going to take my videos for YouTube and put it on Spotify, make it a little bit
Yeah.
seamless. And we were with RSS.com before, which was great service, but you couldn't upload video. So I guess that's really the reason why for the change. And then there's the whole pay aspect behind it because you got to pay for the yearly service and stuff like that. But that's the content creation thing. And a lot of people are on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Like we just started the Facebook group. Instagram, I have accounts, so now I'm start sharing the shorts on there, but those are just there. Like it's not a focal point thing. Mostly YouTube and X are the focal point, and we'll kind of take it from there. It's one of those things. If anybody's there interested in starting something, don't hesitate. Just start, because the quicker you start, the faster the time goes by fast. Like you'll in a year from now, you'll be like, good thing I started, because now I got 50 episodes, and you got to learn from all your mistakes. You got to learn from everything you did wrong, your editing, your audio editing, your video editing, your logo, or if you want to change things, if you want to be on this platform, use a different microphone. Like this is not the microphone I started with. This is not the space I'm going to be ending up with. This is just storage space at the moment. But it's a lot of learning. And I think if you want to look at the big content creators for anything, like if you want to look at podcasters, there's a lot of great indie podcasters, a lot of great big ones. But the one person that probably, I don't know if any educators may talk about him too much, but Mr. Beast, who's the super rich, famous YouTuber guy who owns the world, he does make some valid points about content creation, and especially about YouTube or just in general. He's like, surround yourself with some good people that are going to talk to you and tell you what you did wrong, what you could do well, and learn one new thing every so often that you can improve upon. He's like, don't do everything at once. Do it slowly and over time. He's like, and then, from a year now till 5 years, he's like, then you'll see where you are. But you don't expect like immediate gratification right away. So I'm kind of paraphrasing, but there you go.
Yeah. No, that's, as I'm still like, I'm in episode 3, right? Like, I feel like I'm a baby at this. And that's, I think like, cause you see that often with podcasters that have been around for a while, have done it well. They're like, just start. Like, that's kind of the biggest thing. And this has been something that was on my mind for like year and a half, 2 years, but it took me that long to like get the courage, figure out what I want out of it for myself and for viewers and listeners. And I did feel bad because about a year ago, my wife had bought me like 2 podcasting books.
Mm-hmm.
She bought me a board because it was something that I was talking about often, and it just sat there. Then I felt bad because I was like, oh, you bought me this, but I'm not using it. But now I am, right? And so I think like surrounding yourself, I've been a guest on a wide range of shows like yours. And that I think was a big part of like making those connections and actually hearing from people of like, oh, this is how you do it. It's Steve, it's not that bad. It's not that hard to get started. And obviously there's learning, and that learning will continue. But yeah, no, it's really encouraging and empowering kind of hearing your perspective on it and how you kind of got your footing with it. So before we go into more the back into the education piece. Um, I do have a question. It's kind of just curious if you can share. Uh,
Yeah.
what is with the wrong answers only? Did you have a moment of engagement or a question or an answer that's like one of the biggest laughs you got? Like what is the most like what's the funniest thing you've come across with
Oh,
wrong answers only so far? If you can share that.
well, the funny thing is, wrong answers only was a thing that people kind of do everywhere on social media, but don't really pay attention to. It's like a subset of whatever they do. And I didn't know it was a thing. I thought, to
Mm,
be honest, I thought I came up with it, and I was dying. I was laughing with my wife when I found out that it already existed. But I'm like, everything already exists. But the thing is, because I have a very like dry, sarcastic sense of humor. Like
mm,
my I got Italian, English, Welsh background, so I got a very English Welsh style sense of humor, and I like I always tell my wife I like making opposite jokes. Like to me, wrong answers only is opposite jokes of whatever you're supposed to do, and I'm silly like that. I'm like a kindergartner. I just like the funny things like that. So
mm,
um, I like now on X, I ask a variety of questions. I ask like super serious questions or agree disagree and those and like you get some chuckles from some of the answers like I did a short on YouTube recently with I think it did 8,400 views as of today, and it's been a couple of days. What's the best way to clean the snow? And I'm outside with a broom cleaning snow, and you get chuckles. I got a chuckle out of that. But then the ones that are really funny are the ones you can't say, right? You can't say on the show because they go into a whole different direction and they're really inappropriate. And you're like, oh my god, like those are those are hysterical, those answers, but those are the ones you can't really share. I'm
right.
still careful. I'm still careful about how I portray myself to people because we, how I'm speaking now and what you see in terms of like the podcast show and stuff. That's me. That's who I am. I'm
Mhm,
not, it's not like a character or anything like that. But I'm also careful of like with interviews with people. I'm like I don't swear and I don't do this because I'm a teacher and
mm.
I'm mindful
Sure.
of those things and
Yeah.
I don't want to step up. I don't want to be think it's one of those things where you have a digital media print and you don't want to be that person that all of a sudden it's like, hey, I have an OnlyFans account, and you know what I mean. And then all of a sudden your kids find out, what's happened to people and you hear in the news and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
not to say that I would do that, but just to give you an example is that I don't want to be known for those type of things. So the inappropriate stuff I won't share, but the funny ones are like that. Like you just like how to shovel snow. It's like silly, or how to bake a cake, or what's the best way to get up in the morning. And somebody will be like, keep a chicken in your or keep a rooster in your room. They'll wake you up at 5 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. So and I find that people generally the age range for what the kind of shtick humor I like is like 30 to 65 and it's really and I actually have the demographics I can see now with YouTube and with the old podcast episodes, all the stats. You can kind of see where your demographics go. It takes a long time to get that kind of data because when you're starting out on episode 3, you won't know until you're episode 100 or something like that. So
Yeah.
and then when you get there, you're like, okay, I'm gonna adjust, but and there's always room for feedback. But that's kind of I'm trying to think of another one. No, they're all chuckles. They're all like little chuckles. You know what I mean? Like they keep me young. There you go.
That's good. That's good. And keeping it, I think anytime you're engaging with a large audience, right, it's important to, you know, keeping fun involved. I think it's important. So yeah, so okay, so now we're kind of towards the back end of the episode. And for all of the educators, maybe administrators, people that are working with our children on a regular basis, um, kind of the big premise of the show is, what is for you, Mr. Mike, what is top of mind in education? What is under your hat, so to speak, in terms of like what you're seeing with your students, what you're seeing at your school? Um, it doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be more than it could be one thing, could be a couple different things. What is something maybe that's keeping you up at night, or maybe something else that like, what, this is going really well right now from my lens, from my vantage point, my perspective in education. So what is top of mind for you right now?
I don't want to go on to the negative stuff, but I'll start by some of the stuff that bothers me. I mean, it might be different here in Canada than in the States, but since we all generally get a lot of stuff from each other and share vice versa. I've been talking to some teachers this year, and especially since I was out of the regular scene for a while and just specialized classrooms, I was in my own bubble, not really knowing what's going on. So you try whatever you can to get activities and children engaged and see what they can learn. Because usually you have kids who weren't able to speak, didn't know any phonics, and then you had some kids who were higher abilities who maybe had emotional needs or sensory needs and stuff like that. So I did that for a long time, and going back to the beginning where I did all kinds of classrooms and seeing where the kids were, and there was less technology when I started, and now um, I find, especially since we had the pandemic and we were locked down, and a lot of people did Zoom teaching and online teaching and virtual stuff, and what I learned, and I had to teach doing that too at one point, what I learned is that we have gone so far. Well, let's pick a direction. We've gone so far left or so far right, or like so far in the wrong direction that we have implemented so much technology into the classroom or into schools to say that this is the priority, and education is not the priority. It's like we're blanket fixing things with flashy stuff, and I don't think it helps. I find students now today have such a hard time concentrating, listening to you speak, give instructions. It's not registering unless you're showing them something visually or stimulating on the smartboard or something tech related, and they just can't. And we're getting into it's been for a long time we've been doing this, but the iPads and all that stuff. There's students that don't know how to use a mouse and keyboard, and like I was talking to some of them today in the older grades, you need to know how to use a mouse and keyboard. Everything is mouse and keyboard. You want to do gaming programming, you want to make your own video game, you want to do podcasting, you want to do digital design, you want to go shopping on the internet, you want to pay your bills. You're not doing it with an iPad. It would be there forever, and it's not versatile and it's not great. And they just so used to this stuff. They go home and they get a cell phone from their parents, let's say at a restaurant, or they go home and they play their PS5 or their whatever game system they have until they go to bed. And then on the weekends, they don't go outside. And so the old school mentality, I think we kind of need to bring it back because it's not serving them. And then as a result, and there's a lot of studies out there, and I don't know if you know, I grew up with video games. My first system was Nintendo Entertainment System. I still have it. It's in a box. I love video games, but I know when enough is enough, right? And they don't know when enough is enough, and they get so addicted to it that to a point that they get anxiety and they get stressed when they don't get it. It's like an addiction, and then you can see it in the classroom, and they're sitting there going like this, and then they can't sit still and they can't move, and it's like I think we need more hands-on learning approaches. We need to get their. But hey, it's okay. Build a computer. That's fantastic. Let them learn all about building a computer, where the RAM goes on the motherboard. But let's do more hands-on stuff and get away from watching the smartboard and doing iPads and these things. And it's really like I have, like you were saying, you being a parent. I have my daughter who's 2.5 now, and I do that with her. Like she's got coloring books coming out of the wazoo, reading books in 3 languages. We got Italian, English, French books. We got all kinds of stuff we read with her every night, to the point that where she's bringing like 25 books a night, and I'm trying like, it's time to go to sleep now. Like it's like that's the like, let's go outside in the backyard, and I'm building a fire pit, and she wanted to come outside and like pass me little stones and things like that. Like, get your hands dirty. Let's go. Oh, in the summer we're planting tomatoes. Let's go do that. So I grew up like that, and with the technology, but to the point now it's so addictive that they can't separate it. And I don't know if anybody has the same experience or can echo what I'm saying, but that's for me, that's the big thing right now. And we're focusing, we're throwing all this tech, and there's a lot of these emotional needs, and mental health is a big thing now because everybody's stressed, everything's expensive, and everything's hard, and we're putting pressure on parents to buy these game systems and all kinds of stuff for the kids, and that's all they talk about. And I don't know if you've seen, there was a video going around on the internet during the holidays of this kid getting a PS5 from his parents, and he opened it up, and he could be 7, let's say 7, 6, and he had a little brother who was like 4 or something like that, and he was like, "Oh my god, PS5!" And the kid was like, "I wanted a PC," and he was so upset that he got a PS5. And I remember going back in the day where we go at Christmas time, we were freaking out, we're ripping open the presents, and oh my god, a Nintendo, and almost pooped your pants because you were so excited. It's changed so much nowadays, and
Yeah.
and I don't want to say maybe because technology is instant gratification. Everybody expects you to give them the answer. They don't want to do the work. They don't want to learn. They don't want to make mistakes. And so the technology uh, prevents kids from learning and making mistakes because you learn by making mistakes. And that's the big thing that we're missing in education, is that we're not letting them make mistakes.
So much to unpack what you just said, and so much of it resonates with me, with what I'm seeing in classrooms, as a university supervisor in my area, and now being on the ed tech side of things with teacher training and support. And so the first thing that comes to mind is like, yeah, like attention span is different now, right? Like you need to, what is the snack size thing that you can do as a teacher to meet some sort of standard, right? Some sort of need, solve some sort of problem. Um, and the other thing is, because so I used to have this conversation with my sophomores. Um, and so they would come in with the cell phone, right? Um, and I did have the same experience as you with, like, you get them on a keyboard, you have them put the phone down, and you have them do like what we used to call it, well, I used to call it soft skills, but now it's really like, we kind of, at least in my head, reframed it. Just hearing people talk about it, I'm like, okay, I kind of buy into calling it critical skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Skills that are critical in this century of like, okay, cool. Like, do you know how to open up a Word doc and just do some basic things, right? And I'm not talking about coding. I'm talking about like just, or like how to even just troubleshoot even a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I used to have this conversation with my students, with my sophomores specifically, of like, you all, just talking to them, you all know how to consume technology, because they're the amount of consumption that gets done in just one day is crazy compared to like what we consumed as kids, right?
Yep.
But what it does is that it takes away from them even remotely having the know-how to produce with technology and how to problem solve with technology, or just problem solving in general, right? Like, cause I don't, like, for me, I was way into ed tech, but it wasn't like we were using tech tools 100% of the time either. Right. Um, and so that's where like purposeful technology needs to get integrated in the classroom, the same way that we integrate literacy in every subject area.
Right.
Right. The same way that hopefully we're thinking about social emotional learning in the classroom, and who knows where we're going down with AI and like what that is all going to look like, right? But for me, it was like so. Those are my big two takeaways. There could be more because there's so much with what you said, and so much that resonated with me. Like kind of like the reality of what it's like teaching, because we can get professional development all day long, but like actually being in the room, seeing everything happen where it's at, getting that firsthand account to really articulate it the way that you just did, because I think you were on point with that.
I don't think there's been any professional development that I've enjoyed in the last 15 years or so. It's one of those things, and anybody who's been here and been through professional development early in the stages, they tend to repeat the same things over and over again, And then the only difference we hit was when it was the pandemic time. And then it's like, well, you're going to learn, you're going to do professional development, learn how to do everything virtually, which for a lot of people was new. But if you already knew how to do it or do certain things, it was kind of, it was, it's kind of boring. But then you implement and you do it with the kids. And then
Mhm.
I felt, and I don't know about you, if you know any, spoke to any teachers about it, I felt that the students that, majority of them just could not learn virtually with like the teacher, and then you have a bunch of their faces up. Like I couldn't even look at every, because your eyes are always tracking somebody's eyes and face, and if you have to look at 30 kids on the screen, A, they're not paying attention, B, you're not there, they're just all over the place, and to sit at a screen for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours and do your work and whatever, but to do that all day for 8 hours with students, it was not good. They don't learn anything from it, and then they're trying to bring that to the classroom. And it's just, this, to give you an example, is that you in the elementary school, all the teachers had a calendar on the wall with the letters, with the months, everything, with the fancy graphics and the big chart and all that stuff, and it was a standard thing. And now most of them don't. It's everything's on the smartboard. Come sit down in front of the smartboard, we're going to do the calendar on the smartboard, and
Mm.
everything is digital. So we're eliminating those little things and those hands-on things where the kid could have been responsible as a job to do the calendar in the morning, and that was their thing, and that's how you remember, because that's my job, I got to
Mm.
go do that.
Yeah.
So I could talk about it all day, but I think an AI is very interesting. I don't know. I don't think it's a good thing. I mean AI in terms of like workforce stuff can help with automation and maybe writing practices and stuff, but they're having problems with students in university and high school because the AI is writing the work for them.
Yeah. I admittedly, I left the classroom, the high school classroom, uh, little before that really came down.
Hmm.
And so I'd be curious if I did stay, how I would navigate and handle all that. Um, I'm I'm just more of like, I'm just looking at it. I myself am trying to learn that technology to be, just to have those skills of of how to leverage it in
Have you
more.
tried it?
Yeah. That, so I've done a few professional learning sessions with my company, kind of like how my product can work alongside it. Um, so I've, in preparation of that, I kind of have used it to build, like, you're kind of going back to wrong answers only, building non-examples of a writing passage.
Hmm.
So like showing students and teachers, I'm going to tell the bot, or I'm going to tell the AI, um, write this prompt, give me the answer to this question, or do this prompt, but I want you to do it poorly. I had to do it like a couple times, but it does a pretty solid job of being like, hey, this is what not to do. And then let students annotate and work collaboratively as to why not do this, like why would you avoid to write in this way, to use these kind of grammatical errors, like maybe like falsehoods. And so that's where my brain went with it when I first got my hands on it, and really thinking about how I would use this instructionally, but more of like, I'm modeling it as a teacher. I'm not, I'd be really curious if I was like, if I had the capacity and if we were there legally and ethically, if if we're ever to a point where students have it purposefully in their own hands to use,
Hmm.
um, I would want to read more on it. I would want to learn more on it if it got to that point, because what I was speaking of is more of like modeling it for students to engage with a non-example. What that would look like in a different context, I would truthfully need to grow more.
It's a very, I've used it many times. It's a very good editor. It'll help you with a lot of things. It could rephrase things very well,
Mm.
depending on which one you're using. Some of them are very biased in terms of who programmed it. So
Right.
depending on what political standpoint you stand on, so that's concerning because
Yeah.
there is bias there in the AI. And I don't know if anybody knows this. So somebody asked me about AI and stuff on Twitter and all these companies. A lot of companies, Facebook, Instagram, what they do is they take your data and they sell your data to companies, and those companies use that data to sell things to you, and they're all connected to Google, and you get ads. And I don't know if you've noticed though, but if you have your phone and you have an Amazon app on your phone or anything, and you go shopping, and you were just talking about rollerblades with somebody, don't be surprised if you find rollerblades as an advertisement scrolling through your phone, because your phone's listening to you. So is your Google, so is your Alexa. They're all doing that. Now, in terms of Elon Musk, everyone's like, he saved X and all this stuff and whatever. And I think the app is much better now than it was in terms of functionality and content creator stuff and these ideas. But I think people need to understand that these AIs learn by using information that's inputted, and they're getting information from somewhere. So where are they getting the information from? Well, having this conversation with somebody the other day is that they're getting this information from potentially an app where people ask questions all the time. Was I some guy with a beard? So maybe they're harvesting all the information that we're putting into, and they're using it and they're plugging it into this AI. Now, what does that say about Twitter? Well, Twitter's probably one of those apps that does that. Facebook probably in terms of shopping, or Instagram shopping behaviors and things like that. So they're pooling all this information from everywhere. Then they're talking about, well, what's Tesla? Is Tesla a car company? Tesla's not a car company. Tesla's a data company. Okay, they harvest driving tendencies and different things and behaviors and driving conditions and paths and all this stuff. So it's not really a car company. Just like McDonald's is not a fast food restaurant. McDonald's is a real estate company, right? Because they get prime locations, and then their restaurants are worth exponential money because of where they are and what they're located, and then they brand themselves. So a lot of these things are very scary, especially for education, because it's going to learn. They're going to learn so much about us that it'll be able to teach us what we don't need to know, but we think we'll know. Like, who's to say that AI won't come in? And I guess we always laugh about the Terminator thing with Skynet. Is that that's what's going to happen with AI? It's going to take over and control humanity. But whatever. What is are we learning from AI, or is AI learning from us? And I think that's the question mark for education: is how can we safely navigate that kind of stuff? I don't know if I made sense, but with that
Whew.
ramble, but
That is a yes, that was loaded. But to, I guess, go back to it, like, I guess an earlier point. I've been in the kitchen with my wife, and we're like, oh, you know what we need? We need a new, I don't know, dining room table, or we need silver. Like, it can be anything, right? And yeah, it does show up. I've firsthand have had that experience of it shows up on my Facebook or other
yeah.
platforms. So there is that piece of it. But yeah, like, so all of this is worth talking about. We are coming up on time. Mr. Mike, like, really appreciate you being here and having this conversation, kind of hearing your context within education, but also seeing what you're doing. You wear many different hats, right? So, like, kind of seeing the content creation piece, seeing the podcasting piece, seeing how the poetry and the writing, which I can't wait to get my hands on. I've been meaning to do so for some time, but I feel like the time is now to dig in on that. Where, if people are listening, whether it's now or in the future, what's the best place for them to find you? Would it be X? Would it be your website?
Well, X is probably the best way to find me and reach me, Mr. Mike MTL, which is MR Mike MTL. There it is. And you can go to my website at www.mrmikemtl.com, which is the register to be a guest part of the website for the podcast if you want to go there. And YouTube, we're on YouTube. So it's the Mr. Mike Show, but it's really, I think it's, no, I'm forgetting my own thing, but it's Mr. Mike MTL at Mr. Mike MTL on YouTube, and everywhere else is inconsequential. But if you find them because you happen to stumble upon the webpage, well, they're there, and that's all she wrote.
Awesome. All right. Yes. And for everyone listening, Thank you, thank you, thank you. We have a pretty exciting lineup for the rest of, I want to say, this spring. Like going into the spring, I have guests all the way through March,
Wow.
which is a little crazy because I kind of started this just like, oh, maybe I'll do like an episode or two a month. But now it's turning into a lot more, and I'm super grateful. So in the upcoming months, having friends of mine, but then also people that I don't know, but they're very talented in the field. Um, Authors, consultants, stuff of that nature. Um, and so I'm super excited to see where this goes. And this first season hopefully will wrap up by the time we get into the summer. I do plan on still being a teacher at heart. I still plan on taking the summer off at a certain level, at least with this show, at least with this project. So yeah, so thank you once again. You can find any episode of mine on underhatpod.com. At the moment, we are on Amazon, Apple, and Spotify. And then you can also find, if you look up Underhat Pod on YouTube, you can find us there as well and kind of seeing the video component of it. Feel free to subscribe. But yes, thank you once again. Super grateful for all of you that have been listening, that have been supporting. Really appreciate it. And of course, as always, keep your hats on, but keep your minds open. Thank you.